Welcome to Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, and in this video we're going to be looking at how we can build accounting reports using Power Pivot and DAX measures using three separate tables. Now, the idea behind this example is that we will handle two issues that you may face when you are working with financial data. The first is that you might be using a trial balance that has negative values for credits and positive values for debits. Now, when you're generating reports, you want all of your values to be positive, and so you need to convert the negatives into positive values. And so I'll show you a technique to handle that. And also we'll look at a solution for reporting on financial years using pivot tables. Pivot tables typically use the calendar year when they're working out quarters and things like that. So we can use a date table to allow you to report on financial years. In this case, it's going to be the July to June financial year. Let's make a start. We're going to be using a function language called DAX, which stands for Data Analysis Expressions. And DAX is part of Power Pivot, and it's also part of Power BI. So the techniques we're going to be using in Excel here can be applied to Power BI as well. I have covered Power Pivot in a previous article. If you check out the INTHEBLACK website, and if you look up this article, you'll see a link to the previous article in there. You can also download this example file and follow along with the video. To think about Power Pivot and how it applies to Excel, so Excel generally works two-dimensionally. We have rows and we have columns. Now, to think about Power Pivot, you can have rows and columns, but you can also then have multiple tables. And that's what we'll be looking at today. We're going to be using Power Pivot and Excel's data model, which sort of sits in the background, and we'll be relating tables together. So this is like a relational database. It's not a relational database, but it's like a relational database. So let's have a look at the tables that we're going to work with. We've got trial balances from multiple months for multiple years, and they have the monthly amount as well as the balance amount. We've got profit and loss, and we've got balance sheet accounts, but we're only going to be building a summary profit and loss report. So we're not going to look at the balance sheet. But the balance sheet items are in there, so the trial balances should balance back to zero. So we've got a trial balance table. We've also got a table of the accounts, and this has the category, which we're going to be using, as well as the sign. And this is how we're going to solve the problem of credits being shown as negative, whereas in the report we want them to show as positive. And we've also got a date table. So this takes every date that we've got in our trial balance and it allocates it across to a financial year month, a combination of the financial year number and the month, as well as the quarter. So these have all got formulas in them. Feel free to have a look at those. We're not going to be looking at those today, but we are going to be looking at DAX. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get these tables into the data model, and we're going to use Power Pivot to do that. And so each of these tables has a name. I will show you that. This one's called TBL Trial Balance. I use the TBL prefix on all my table names. And TBL Accounts, this one, and this one's TBL Dates. So they're the three tables that we're going to import into the data model. So with Power Pivot selected, we can click inside the table and click Add to Data Model. And this is the Power Pivot window. We'll come back to this in a minute. We need to add the other ones. You can move this to another screen, which I'll do at the moment, and just to get it out of the way. And then I'll come into here, the accounts, and I'll add that to the data model. And we'll go to the dates, and we'll add that to the data model. Okay, so that's updated the Power Pivot window. So if I make this larger, we can see we've got the TBL trial balance, TBL accounts, and TBL dates. At the moment, these are all separate tables. So what we're going to do is go to this diagram view, which gives you a listing of the tables with their column names. So we haven't got lots of columns, but let's just open these up so we can see what they are. Now, what we're going to do is relate these together. Now, the trial balance, normally you would put down the bottom because this is the data table. So this has all of the transactions, if you like. And these two tables are the lookup tables. So we're going to relate these together. So first thing we're going to do is grab the date column from TBL dates, and I'm going to drag that to the date column of the trial balance. That creates a relationship between the tables. Now, the names of the columns don't have to be identical, but what's in the columns do. And this is the lookup tables, so this needs unique entries. In this case, each date is only in there once. On the account side, I'm going to grab the account number and drag that to the account. As you can see, that just says account on that one. It doesn't say account number. But these three tables are now related together, and we can build reports based on all of these tables. We'll start off with a check total. So let's go and create a pivot table. And I'll do that in a new worksheet. And this will be our check. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag from the trial balance, I'm going to drag the amount column to the value section. And what I'll do is I'll put the account on the rows. So this has all of, if I zoom out a bit, I'll leave it about there. So if we go down to the bottom, we see we've got a 1 cent balance. So there's probably a rounding issue in that, and that's rounding to 1 cent, and that is across multiple years. So that's a couple of years data in this table, and this is all of the values. So I haven't split this up into financial years or anything like that. I'm just doing this as a check total. Okay, so that looks good. So we're adding all that up. Now, so far, we haven't really used the data model. All we've done is put the amount there. It's best practice that when you are building reports with Power Pivot, that you create a measure for each value that you want to place on your report. And so that's what we're going to build now. We're going to build a workings measure that is going to be the basis for the other measures. So let's see how we do that. So measures, I'm going to click the drop down here on Power Pivot tab and click new measure. And what we're going to do is we're going to save this into the TBL trial balance because that's where the transactions are. The measure name, this is going to be called report amount. This is a workings measure. It will fix the issue of the negative values that was discussed earlier. And now we're going to build the DAX formula. Now, DAX is a function language, so it's very similar to Excel's function language, but it's more complex because it can involve multiple tables. There is a learning curve for DAX. What we're going to be covering today are just very simple DAX measures and DAX formulas, but they can get quite complex and quite long. So this article and video are just an introduction to DAX and how you can use DAX with accounting reports. We're going to use a function, and I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. We're going to use the SUMX function. Now, when there's an X on the end, it means it's an iterator function, which means you can perform a calculation row by row across a table. And we need that to fix the negative issue. We need to convert the credits into positive numbers. So we're going to use a lookup table to convert all of the numbers for the revenue, for example, which is shown as credits, into a positive number. So let's build the formula. So we're going to refer to the table that we're working on, which in this case is TBL trial balance. If you start typing it, you get this IntelliSense, which reduces the options. So I can just hit the tab key now. And so that's the table I'm working on, comma. And now I need to convert the amount. So TBL trial balance amount times, and I can use a function called related. So what I need to do is, based on the account number in this table, I want to go and grab the sign, which was the last column in the accounts. And that had either a -1 or a 1 in there. If it had a -1, it's going to convert the credits into positive numbers. If it's got a 1, it's going to leave the number unchanged. So we're going to multiply by that sign, which is coming from a separate table. And we can do this because we related the tables together. So I need to grab the TBL accounts sign column. So I can just double click that. I can make this a bit bigger, I think. And that's it. Close the bracket. So that's going to multiply the amount by whatever the sign is for the related account number in this trial balance. One of the advantages with a DAX measure is that you can format it. So when you put it into the pivot table, it will automatically be formatted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a whole number and the thousands separator. So I'm not worried about the dollars and cents. So even though this is showing dollars and cents, I'm going to just show the whole dollars value. That's it. We can check the formula to make sure it's working. Oh, and what I've missed is the final bracket. Let's try it again. There we go, that's better. So I need 2 brackets on the end. So there was a bracket on the related and then a bracket for the SUMX. And so these work in the same way that Excel functions do, but as I mentioned, they tend to be a little bit more complex than Excel's basic functions. No errors in the formula, we're good to go. Let's click OK. And when you've got a pivot table active and you add a new measure to the data model, it'll automatically put that into your report. So, and this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to check these values. So as you can see, where are that? These are our revenue accounts. And so they're all credits. And you can see now that they've been converted into a positive value. This means that when we go down to the bottom here, we do not now balance to 0. So we've converted all of the negative values into a positive value. So it's not going to balance back to 0 now, but we can use these values in our report. Note there is one account that is a cost, but it's a movement account, so it could be positive or negative, and so it hasn't been converted. Even though it's a negative, it's actually in that sign table. If we go have a look at that, this is the account. It's a work in progress movement account, so it keeps its sign, so I've just used a 1 there. But you can see the revenue items here have all been converted using a -1. Let's go back to our report. I'll call this TB check. So we're going to, as we build our measures, I'm going to report on them here so that we can check that they're working as we expect. So, and it's a good idea to do this as you create your measures to just check that they are doing exactly what you're expecting. The report amount measure won't be used in any of the reports, but we can use this measure to build the measures we will use in the report. So I've got a list here of the measures that we want to create. Now, what I can do is I can cheat and I can just copy this. So I'm going to copy that. And this is our revenue. Now, this pattern we can use for these other categories. So these are the categories from the accounts table. So I want to identify revenue, direct costs, and indirect costs. So just to remind you that the trial balance does not have that information. The trial balance just has the account number. And so we're going to convert these account numbers into their respective categories, and that's what we're going to use in our report. So let's go create some more formulas. So we're going to do a new measure, and this one's going to be called revenue, and I'll paste that formula in here. I'll get rid of the equals. We only need one. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Calculate function is probably the most powerful function in DAX. In this case, we're using it like a SUMIFS function in Excel, or a SUMIF function, where we're going to be adding up all of the report amount. Now, what's important here is that there's two types of references in this calculate function. The first is a measure. So that's that one we just created. So it's called report amount. And what this calculate is going to do is going to add up all of the report amounts when the category equals revenue. So this is going to add up all of the accounts in our trial balance when that account is a revenue category that's from our accounts table. Okay, so this is looking across tables. So the report amount is in the trial balance table, but the category is in a separate table. And because we've related the tables together, then we have the ability to create this report. I'll just check the formula, or I'll just set the format first. Actually, I've just used whole number, and I'll check the formula. That's all good. As I mentioned earlier, there are two types of references in this formula. The first is the measure which is enclosed within the square brackets, which is the report amount. The second type of reference is when you are referring to a column in a table. When you do that, you always include the table name followed by the column name or field name in the square brackets. So it's vital that you follow that convention, because that enables you to pick up if a reference is to a measure or to a column in a table. So let's add that in and click OK. So that's revenue. Now if we go back to our TB check, because I didn't have it activated, didn't add it, so I can just tick this to add it in. And this is how we're going to check it. So all of our revenue accounts, that was these negatives here, have now been identified. So we now have a total for all of the revenue. I will pause the video now, and I'll create a measure for direct costs and then indirect costs, and then I'll come back and show how to create the gross margin measure. So I've created these two other measures, direct costs and indirect costs. So we can see them here. So what I'm going to do now is create another new measure. This one's called gross margin. So let's have a look at how we create that one. So the gross margin is going to be a calculation based on two other measures. So the first is revenue. So when you start typing, again, you can see the revenue is highlighted. And again, I can make this a little bit bigger. So then we can subtract the direct costs. So again, if you start typing, the measures will appear. So there we go. And that's it. So I'll just set the format for that and create that. So that's our gross margin. Now the next measure, we need to calculate a percentage. So the gross margin percentage. We have a built-in function called divide, which allows us to avoid the divide by zero error. So let's see how we use that. So divide, and we can divide one number by another. So I'm going to divide the gross margin by the revenue, and that's it. It defaults to 0. You can actually define something else as the third argument if you don't want to display a 0, but in this case, I'm happy with a 0. This one here is going to be a percentage. So I want a number and a percentage, and I'm happy with 2 decimal places. Oh, I need to give it a name. So this is going to be gross margin %, and that's it. I'm going to create two other measures that are similar to what we've just created. So I'll pause the video and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've created a profit percentage and a profit before tax calculation. And again, we can make this a bit wider so you can see all of those calculations listed there. So let's go and just test them and make sure that they're doing what they should do. So I'll close this and we can go back to our check and we can tick all of these. So I've got direct costs, so they're all listed there. Indirect costs, and they're all listed there, so that's pretty good. I'll just widen this. So I've got gross margin and profit before tax, so we can check those calculations. Now we've also got the percentages. They work a little bit differently. If we put them on, you'll see that they don't work on the individual line items, but they do work in total. So we've got totals there. So let's check these. So I'll just make sure that doesn't change. A quick shortcut, if you want to fix a set of rows at the top, then you can use what's called freeze panes. There's a keyboard shortcut to do that. Alt-WFF. You press those in sequence, and so now I can scroll down and we can do some checks. So I'm going to add up the revenue and deduct our direct costs. That checks and confirms the gross margin. And then I'll check that and deduct our indirect. So that's all looking good. And if we then check the percentages, so I want that divided by the revenue. It's 25, and that divided by the revenue. I'll change those to a percent. And there we go. So all of those look like they're working as they should. So that's all of the values that we need to put into our very simple profit and loss report. So let's see how we build it. So I'll go back to Power Pivot and Manage, and let's create a new pivot table on a new worksheet. So the three tables are all listed here. And so we can grab fields from different tables and build our report. So let's see how we do it. We're pretty much going to be using our measures to build these reports. So the measures will get dragged into the values section. So let's have a look at some of the reports that we can create. Oh, by the way, the measures have this FX in front of them. So all of these are the measures. They're all listed at the bottom of the table where you save them. Okay, so let's create the basic layout. So I'm going to put the revenue there, then direct costs, then the gross margin. I'll make this a bit bigger. Then the indirect costs, and then the profit before tax. That should probably be going there, and then the percent to there. Okay, so that's our basic report. Now, this is horizontal, and that's because they've been added to the column section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this where it's got the sigma values, so adding up the values. I'm going to drag that and put that on the rows, and then that'll give us a vertical listing. And that's probably the layout that you'd want to use. And so there we have our values. Now, so far this is in total. So that's the total for all of the trial balances. So we need to adjust that to see the different amounts. So to do that, we can go to our dates table. So we could put the financial year across the columns, and that gives us our financial year sales now. So this makes a little bit more sense for accounting terms. So 2024 and 25. In 2026, the data finishes in February at the moment. If you wanted the quarters, you could then put your quarters in. And if you wanted the months, probably a good idea to put the month and a number there. And there we can see quite quickly, you can get your monthly reports set up and also quarterly reports. They're coming from the TBL dates. So typically when you're creating the layout, you'll use the entries from the lookup tables, which is, in this case is the date table for dates. that completes the first report. So a quick way to make a copy of a report. I'm just going to copy this sheet. So this one is, let's call it FY report. So it's FY month report. There we go. So the easy way is to drag it over with the mouse and then hold the control key, release the mouse, and that makes a copy of the report. Now I can go right click and see the field list. Now at the moment I've got the financial years in there and the quarters. Let's get rid of those. So I don't need the quarter and I don't need them. I just want to look at it for financial years. Something you can do is you could grab the state out of the trial balance there. So if we go in here and grab the state, you could put that as a filter. So we can see the filter there. You could also use what's called a slicer. So this is a slicer. I'll click on that, and from the trial balance, I'll grab the state, click OK. This one is a little bit easier to use. So we can look at New South Wales or Victoria or WA. The blanks, by the way, were the balance sheet accounts. So if you click that, you actually wouldn't get anything because the balance sheets do not link to these categories. So you can see that that's working correctly. So there we go. So there is a very easy way to filter the data based on a slicer. You can also use this filter drop down, but the slicer tends to be a little bit easier to work with. This has been an introduction to how you can build some accounting reports with DAX. There are different ways to do things with DAX, so don't take this as the only way to build reports with DAX, but this is one way to do it. You can build more complex reports as well using DAX for things like the balance sheet and the cash flow. And the cash flow is a lot more complex than, let's say, the balance sheet. So it is possible, but it does take some more advanced DAX skills. You can use AI to help you build your DAX. You can also use AI to help explain DAX. So if you come across a DAX formula, you can use AI to help you explain and learn how the DAX formula is built. Oh, by the way, I use this layout for pivot tables. You might use this layout, which is sort of the old school layout where you had the sections down the bottom. I prefer this second option, which if you click the cog icon, mainly because you can see all of the fields or columns listed and then just drag them to the sections. So when you're building DAX formulas, you need a setup phase. So that's typically relating the tables together. You need a testing phase as you're building your reports. So that's when I was using this little pivot table to make sure that my revenues, etc., were all going in the right position. And then I used just some good old Excel formulas to make sure everything was working as it should. We should use the original trial balance figure just to confirm that the profit figure is correct. We can use a sum function to do that. We can add up the account numbers from the 3,000 range to the 6,000 range, and we can format it to make sure that it matches. And as we can see, it confirms it's a credit figure because the credits are larger than the debits. It's a profit. You do need to maintain the report as well, so any new account numbers need to get added to the accounts table. If you do have issues, you can use the AI, as I mentioned, to help you build, fix, or understand your DAX measures. Okay, so that's been a bit longer than usual for the video. So hopefully you've seen a few possibilities in terms of using DAX to build your accounting measures. And just to remember, DAX is also part of Power BI. So everything we did today, you can apply directly to Power BI as well. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.